So we are back from PAX. That was unbelievably my first ever Penny Arcade Expo of any kind. I'd never been to East or Prime or Australia or South, I guess is another one that's happening soon. But yeah, that was my first PAX experience. It was really fun to get to like meet all the fans and stuff and hang out and get drunk a lot of the time and just make whatever videos we felt like making. It was really cool. So expect a bunch of those videos this week. One game though that I actually didn't see at PAX Prime but did see at a Gamescom showing earlier was a game called Until Dawn. This is a game from Sony that is kind of interesting in that it disappeared for a while. If you don't remember, Until Dawn was originally announced like 2 Gamescoms ago as a PS3 game that used motion controls. It was actually going to use the PlayStation Move for everything. Now it is back. It is PS4 exclusive. It's using the Killzone Shadowfall engine, and they've stripped all those motion controls out. So it is all DualShock 4. Sorry, I should say the motion controls are there, but they are not using the PlayStation Move. I actually asked them specifically if you could use the Move if you wanted to, and they said no, just DualShock 4, but you are moving the controller around to aim the flashlight. And it's very, very straightforward, I think. Its closest neighbor is probably something like Heavy Rain. The stuff that I played was very focused on small QuickTime events and making choices in the story, and the game is pretty much what it looks like. You know, it's like a very jump scare driven, sort of typical horror game, kind of corny, and atmospherically it's just pretty standard, although very pretty. The character faces look great. So even though Until Dawn is a pretty standard horror walk around, interact with things type game, there was one thing about the demo that stood out to me. This demo, by the way, is the same one that was at Gamescom and at PAX this year. So if you saw the game in that state, it's the same thing that I saw. But basically how it works is when you first pick up the controller, there is a survey, a pretty long survey actually, that asks you about 10 or so personal questions about you as a player. So it opens with a pretty basic one. Are you male or female? And do you see yourself as a leader or as a follower? But then it gets really weird and starts asking you like, which do you find more frightening, movies or games? Which is scarier, tension or gore? Do you play horror games with the lights on or the lights off? And do you stop playing when the game gets too scary? And then it gets pretty personal. It asks you, like, in a horror situation, would you save your friends first or save yourself? And immediately my head started spinning with like, oh my god, how is this going to affect Until Dawn? How is this going to affect my gameplay decisions? Like, if I pick the answer to this question improperly, is it going to change the way that the demo plays out? I actually lied in one of them. There was a question about gore versus tension. Which do you find scarier? And I chose gore because in reality I find tension and jump scares way worse. So I just kind of faked it and said gore, hoping that I would get a more violent version of the game because I hate being startled completely. And I was wondering, like, what is the rest of these questions going to do? Like, will it make me feel guilty if I say that I would choose myself over my friends? How much will this affect the overall like scariness and atmosphere of the game? And just like I just started wondering, like, this is so cool. It almost reminded me of something like Eternal Darkness or something like that. Like, I love it when horror games mess with players. So when I got to the end of this survey, I asked the game's representative on hand what all this stuff meant. Like, would these decisions see repercussions in the demo? Will there be more surveys later in the game, etc.? And the answer that I received kind of broke my heart a little bit. It turns out that the questions in this demo do not do anything. And as a matter of fact, they were only there in the demo to kind of get players used to the flashlight controls, and they do not affect the gameplay in Until Dawn whatsoever. Which kind of kills me because what I thought was so interesting, what I thought was the most interesting thing about Until Dawn were these questions and these survey things, and it feels like maybe a missed opportunity, possibly, for something really cool. It also reminded me a lot of one of the most underrated horror games of all time, in my opinion, and that is Silent Hill Shattered Memories on the Wii. Now, this game was created by Climax Studios, and it was kind of a retelling slash reboot of the original Silent Hill story, and it's also one of the only Silent Hill games worth talking about that was developed outside of Japan. So just like the demo of Until Dawn, Silent Memories opens with a survey that is asking you a bunch of questions about your personality. So how easily do you make friends? What are your drinking habits like? What is your sexual history? Stuff like that. And the cool part was that this stuff actually affected the game, sometimes in some very subtle ways. Examples of how these decisions affected the gameplay in Silent Memories include the monster designs changing based on your answers, the conversations in the cutscenes, and even some of the characters' appearances, and even the game's various endings were determined by your answers to these surveys. And there were actually multiple therapy sessions throughout the game in between the mission, and all of them were very different. It also didn't just keep track of your answers in the therapy sessions, it kept track of, for example, how you were looking. Because just like in Until Dawn, Shattered Memories is a game mostly about pointing a flashlight at things, and if you stared at a poster for a long time, if you like maybe didn't make eye contact with a therapist during the therapy sessions, these things would all play into the way that the game thought about you as a player and the way that it would determine how the game plays out, which was awesome at the time, and is still something that I think is really underexplored today. There's one really memorable sequence in particular that I remember where the therapist gives you a coloring book with a picture of like a happy family in front of a house with a car and like a roof and just a very prototypical looking American family. And he gives you a coloring book. So you pull out these crayons and using the Wii remote, or I guess in the PS2 version of the game, the controller, you color in this house however you want. You can like color the door and the wall and the roof and the shirts. And then fast forward to the next cutscene in the game, in the next encounter, the main character, Harry, walks up to a house that is colored exactly like the one that you colored in the game. The character's shirts are all colored the way that you colored them in the game. And actually, the best part is that if you rush through the coloring sequence, Harry is really abrupt and rude in the conversation with the people in the house, whereas if you take your time and really color it in slowly, he's a little more patient and a little bit calmer during the cutscene. Just like, stuff like that just kills me, man. It is so cool to see games that are dynamic and reactive and play with what you find scary, what you're like as a player, and that ask you uncomfortable questions that make it kind of weird to play in front of your friends. I remember playing through Silent Hill Shattered Memories in high school with a really close friend of mine, and one of the first questions the game asks you is if you're a virgin, and like me and my 16-year-old friend sitting in a room together, I'm just like, dude, if you want me to turn around while you answer this survey, that's totally fine. It's none of my business. These are some very personal questions, and I love shit like that. I love it when Catherine did it, and I love it when this game does it too. And in a world where everyone is streaming the games that they're playing all the time, I totally recommend you go on YouTube and watch some Silent Hill Shattered Memory playthroughs, because when it gets to those survey sections, it's the people playing the games tend to get pretty uncomfortable in a way that is just totally delightful. But yeah, that is, I don't know, I just, Until Dawn, my main takeaway from it was that it made me think about what I loved about Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and I kind of want to go back and play through that game again. If you ever played Silent Hill Shattered Memories or have any opinions on these sort of dynamic horror games that mess with your mind and ask you really personal questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm twitter.com/Babylonian, and yeah, in the meantime, thank you for watching.
Just decided to embrace the fun and kind of go all in for this kind of lighthearted, more fun approach, and kind of match the narrative to what you're actually doing in the gameplay. So that's what we ended up with now for Dead Island 2, this more fun approach. But like I said, I think Jaeger still has its stamp on it in looking at the details and, you know, doing a lot of research.